Netta, and I'm the person behind Life After Sugar, and I want to talk to you about my first birthday. Well, not my first birthday, but the first anniversary of my podcast, the Life After Sugar podcast. Just like starting your sugar-free life, the secret to starting a podcast, I found out, was to just start. And here we are 1 year later, and to talk about the highlights, I'm chatting with my good friend Dan Greef from the UK Low Carb podcast.
Oh, and I should say this as well, by the way. Happy birthday, birthday, anniversaire, however it goes in French, I don't know. But
yeah, it's not my birthday, but it's my podcast's first birthday. Can you believe it?
Well, it's a weird one because, okay, I think there's a reason that you and I are doing this, because we actually met through a Facebook group, didn't we, about podcasting? Yeah. And that must have been almost a year to the day, like early to mid-January-ish, that we met, because we were talking in there and you said, oh, I've got this podcast coming out. I think I had Gary Torbs coming on the show around that time. And we talk about that. And, you know, of course, you knew him very well because of his links to sugar and keto. And then I was talking to you about setting up a podcast and what it's like. And I love the way you gave yourself a challenge. You said, I've set myself a challenge. It has to be published in January. Like come hell or high water, it will come out.
Yeah.
Can you explain when it did come out? Because I love the fact that your dates and your cadence is based on the date that is released, right?
Yes. It was like I set myself this challenge, and you know, I'm not one to let myself down, as it were, and it's just something that made me accountable. So I was scrambling to get things ready for January, because I said I'm going to get this podcast out before the end of January 2021. And then, you know how things take much longer than you ever think they would, especially in the tech world, the online world.
Everything in life is like that. Everything takes longer than you think. Yeah,
absolutely. So January comes along, and then, you know, I was starting my new semester at my teaching job, and everything sort of conspired to make it more complicated than I'd ever thought possible. And sort of the end of January was creeping along, and I thought, I've got to do what I said I was going to do. In the end, 31st of January was a Sunday. I wasn't ready before then, but that Sunday I pressed publish. You know,
you just had to go for it.
Because I said I would do it. So I did it. And it ended up being on a Sunday. So after that, it was like, well, I guess all my podcast episodes are going to be out on a Sunday now, because I wanted to do it weekly. So that's how it, and I told you, didn't I? I made myself accountable, not just for myself, but to you. I said, it's going to come out before the end of January 2021.
Just out of interest, and of course, this is a hypothetical question, but how much longer would it have taken, do you think, if you hadn't set that deadline?
Oh, another year.
Yeah, easily, because it's not actually all about the amount of stuff you have to do tech-wise or preparation-wise. It's mental stuff. It's the mindset stuff you have to get over, and and how you build up the confidence just to take the plunge. In some ways, you never would talk yourself into it. Having a hard deadline is a case of, that's it, it's happening, we're jumping.
Yes, absolutely. It's like, just do it. Just press the button. Just do it.
But it takes time, and I think that's why listenership grows gradually and relationships grow gradually, because it is about a relationship. It's about that connection with someone, and you can't rush that. You just have to keep going and steadily, slowly build up the audience, build up the narrative that you want to build.
Yes, totally. Yes. And be yourself, I would say. You know, just carry on being yourself and sort of not apologizing about it to anyone. Yeah. And I've had people write to me over the last year, you know, to say they take me along with them on their walks, which is lovely. You know, that they listen to my podcast when they're washing the dishes or when whatever, you know, you can multitask when it's a podcast.
I was just going to ask you then, over this last year, would you mind sharing some highlights, things that have stood out for you? Because, I think this expression is used too much for my liking, but in this context, it does actually apply really well. It is a journey, and this year for you has been one heck of a journey. So I'd like to know, if you wouldn't mind, like a few highlights, and then just to reflect on those. I think it'd be really interesting to hear.
Well, let's see now. Because it started out, this Life After Sugar podcast started out in the throes of COVID. You would have thought that it would be more difficult, but the beauty of the whole online world, and podcasting included, is that, whether or not there happens to be a pandemic doesn't really matter. Although what I found was that actually, I guess, people are more online or are more used to now being online, or you could argue have more time even to listen to podcasts than they did before. Although I used to listen to them when I was driving in my car, and I don't drive in my car as much anymore because I'm not going anywhere. But be that as it may, it seemed that to me that, first of all, there's no good time or bad time to start a podcast. And I would venture to say the same for stopping sugar, just to plug it.
Yeah.
There is no good or bad time.
Point.
Just get it done, like we were saying at the beginning. Just do it, start. So in that sense, that was a highlight, was just getting started, doing it.
Yeah.
Another highlight, I would say, just generally, was all the people that I met doing this podcast. My first plan was to do alternating 1 week a solo episode and another week with a guest. And what ended up happening was that lasted for about 2 months, if that, because then I got so inspired getting in touch with people, asking them to be guests, that it ended up, my solo episodes ended up getting the boot. It was like other people, not necessarily more interesting than I am, but it's just so wonderful to have I had all these people lined up and episodes recorded. I still do. I've got a dozen.
Well, I think the thing with that is, even if it's, I mean, all of my shows are with somebody else, apart from actually the one that came out on a Tuesday the other day. But apart from that, they are always, this conversation, because you come across as equally as that person does in the conversation. It's not like you're just literally asking a question and then shutting up and then, and then just nodding and saying yes now and again. It's a proper conversation. And I think people, the best podcasts, in my opinion, are where you feel like a fly on the wall and you're just observing what's going on, and you feel like they don't even know they're being recorded. That's where it's really special, where they honestly are having a good conversation. It's really genuine. And that's why I think it probably brings out more in you to have somebody as well, because they bring out your character, your personality.
Exactly. Yes, you get to know someone through a podcast, and for me, I'll tell you a secret. I don't script any of it or plan any of it. We just wing it. And I think that makes for the most authentic conversations.
Yeah, no, I think it does.
Yeah, and the few solo episodes I did do, I did plan them more, but then after that, I sort of just let go a bit more.
Yeah. I think so, and I think, but that's probably natural anyway. When you start anything new, you're always probably going to be more, well, I suppose cautious, which is the word, isn't it? You're going to be more cautious about those things. But as you grow in confidence, you don't need it so much, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's lovely. I'll tell you another highlight was having my dad on the podcast, but it was for a Father's Day episode, and I'm going to have my mum on for Mother's Day as well, the British Mother's Day, which is in March, whereas American one is in May. But and funnily enough, that recording I did I think it was about 3 years ago when he was visiting, and we recorded out in the street in some cafe in Montreal. And he's still alive. It's not like I couldn't have talked to him, but it was just such a spontaneous recording, he and I, that I wanted to include it in the podcast. I'm happy.
That's special. How lovely. And it's also a way of like remembering and keeping that sort of special and protected forever, isn't it? It's just there then.
What I felt over the last year of making this podcast is we're all on the same side, as it were, and we're all on the same page. And so we're all working towards the same goal in different ways. So for me, I had people as much who are 100% vegan, 100% carnivore, keto, not keto, sort of regular, people that just happen to have cut down sugar, not necessarily 100%, They don't have to be like me. In fact, I tell people, please don't be like me. One is enough in this world. We can all be different. It's all different shades of life after sugar. And that, I think, is what makes it so inspiring, because every story is different. Every story is inspiring, and you don't have to be sort of a health coach or even you're sort of health minded to cut down sugar and to live the benefits of it. And I think that's what is helping a lot of people to think, well, if she can do it, if he can do it, and they're just regular people like me, so can I.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing, isn't it? Amazing. You don't know the ripple effect that your podcast will have, or any decision. And I would say again, I keep bringing this back to sugar as well. You don't know what it will do when you stop eating sugar, or at least reduce it. You have no clue. I had no clue, how it would make me feel, or sort of what it would create. You just don't know. This is why I say, you just do it. Just start.
Yeah, but then I do remember you saying when you came on my podcast last year how you used to eat a lot of chocolate, didn't you? I think you remember you saying. And I don't know what it was like for you, but I think the thought of doing something like giving up chocolate is probably worse than actually doing it. Well, it's hard in the first instance if you do have a real problem with that food. I appreciate, and I'm not belittling how people feel. However, you do get past that phase, wherever that thing is, and you actually live without it and you're fine. I think,
Yeah.
but quite often it is the first step that's the hardest. And actually probably the second, third, fourth, fifth, when you're still craving it and you haven't had it, it's the hard part, isn't it? However, there is life after sugar, as your podcast suggests.
Yes, there definitely is. I think it's the idea of the first step that is actually more difficult than the first step itself. It's, the things we tell ourselves, myself included, it's going to be tough, I'll never survive. What is life like without chocolate? It's not worth living. And all these things that we tell ourselves as sort of justifications for not taking action. And for me, it was like I was telling myself all these things, but the bottom line was, no pun intended, the bottom line was I was still constipated and suffering. And if I didn't change something, then nothing would change.
Yeah.
But there's another you hidden, behind all that sort of mindless eating, mindless snacking, dependency on types of foods for your comfort and reward, and stress management and soothing. It's like, for me at least, and I can tell you for my guests as well, but I'd rather talk just about me. I had to grow up. I had to grow up, become an adult, and deal with my emotions and my stress in a grown-up way, which biscuits and chocolate and ice cream were sort of keeping me in that childish mentality of sort of, I don't want to deal with this. I'm just going to smother it in chocolate.
Wow. That's incredibly powerful the way you say that. You don't give yourself any breaks there, do you? You just went straight for I have to grow up. Wow.
But I didn't realize I was doing it until I'd done it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Makes
It
sense.
was like, I didn't set out to say, oh, I'm 45. That's how old I was when I first cut out sugar. Why don't I act like it? Not at all. I was in complete denial and in resisting even admitting that I was acting a bit like a toddler. And you should know, because you're just coming out of that.
I didn't know what you were going to say there, Netta. I thought you were going to say, and you should know, Dan, because you do this every day. You
I've been
toddler.
there. I know what you're going through.
Yeah,
So
I have a
it's
toddler.
like,
Should I say for her listeners, I have a toddler. So yeah, it is like that exactly. The tantrums, the wanting things, and when they
now,
get their own way, stamping their feet. Yeah.
yes, and as I say, we do that way into adulthood. At least I used to. And a lot of my guests, even though they don't say it in those words, a lot of my guests discovered just new ways to deal with their emotions, to love themselves in other ways than with refined sugar, which, when you think about it objectively, is you're sort of taking something that will cause metabolic havoc in your body, weight gain, inflammation, all those things, and you're taking that to make you feel better. It makes no sense. Because
Yeah,
it's
it
not
doesn't.
about making sense anyway.
But I also think that as human beings, I think you've really tapped into something so important there. I think we make the error of thinking ourselves very rational. And so, I've heard this described like this before, and I was reading a really good psychological book, and it said, we think our minds are the Oval Office, when in actual fact, our minds are the press office. We're trying to post rationalize what we've already decided based on our emotions. And if we just think that our emotions can be let rampant to do what they want, like you just said there, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's where you get yourself in trouble. You can rationalize anything afterwards, but actually knowing how to manage yourself, I think that's the best way of saying it, and what works for you. So for me, for instance, environment is a huge one. If I change my food environment, I make life a lot easier, or I make it a lot harder for myself, depending which choice I make.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. And it's great that we can do the audio for the podcast and the video for like YouTube and stuff. Is great. We
Oh
live
yeah,
in
you got
a wonderful
options.
age.
Yeah, exactly. It's in a wonderful age. In fact, we can now have our own channels. We can now have our own TV and radio shows. That's effectively what these are, and it's
Amazing.
really exciting that you can do it. So, well, thank you for joining me today, Netta. It's been really
Thank
lovely
you.
catching up, and I'll hope you have a lovely, successful second year with the show. I know you will, and it just grows and grows and grows and grows.
Thanks, Dan. Smashing. Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for watching, and if you're enjoying the videos here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and subscribe to the Life After Sugar podcast too. See you again soon.